right, everybody, welcome to Housing Washington. Welcome back. I am delighted to introduce Lauren Lowery. She is the Program Director of Housing for the National League of Cities. And we were just chatting beforehand and realizing that the mayor of Tacoma is the second vice president, will be first vice president next year, and she will be president the following year of the National League of Cities. So it's great to see such a heavy involvement by one of our local area, Puget Sound area mayors. So that's terrific. This is a great opportunity for us to look at utilizing the racial equity lens to design an eviction prevention strategy. This has been a really important part of the National League of Cities, and I am thrilled to have Lauren here to share her expertise and tell us more about the program. So Lauren, welcome.
Thank you, Cheryl, and thank you for having me here at Housing Washington. I'm excited for our session today on utilizing a racial equity lens to design an eviction prevention strategy. And so just diving into the session, as it was mentioned, my name is Lauren Lowery, a Program Director for Housing and Community Development at National League of Cities, and I'll be your presenter today. And we have a very robust agenda today where I'll be talking about our current work at National League of Cities, also talking about how to build a successful eviction prevention strategy, tools related to eviction prevention when you're thinking about building out your eviction prevention strategy, as well as ensuring equitable results, and then providing you with some additional resources to go through. And then we're going to open it up for a Q&A today. Who is the National League of Cities? National League of Cities is the voice of America's cities, towns, and villages, representing more than 200 million people across the country. Our mission is to strengthen local leadership, influence federal policy, and drive innovative results. And now I want to go into what we have currently been working on at National League of Cities. More specifically, what we've been working on over the last 18 months since the start of the pandemic.
Lauren, before we get too far in, I just want to confirm we're currently seeing your title slide. Oh, there we go. We're into the welcome and introduction slide. Looks like we're a little bit behind here. If you want to try to stop your sharing and then restart it momentarily, I think that'll catch it back up.
Okay. Does it look good?
So it says Lauren Lowery has started screen sharing, but we're not seeing your slides just yet.
Okay.
Let's try one more time.
Okay.
Looks like we're getting stuck on the screen sharing here.
Do you want me to send my slides to you?
Yeah, that'd be great. And I'll go ahead and put my email in the chat for you here.
Okay.
And Lauren, if some of the slides can be discussed without being seen, that's fine too, and we can catch up when he comes back with that. But he'll put it on the screen as soon as possible. Thanks everybody for hanging in there. This is a good presentation. We just have to make sure you can see it at the same time that you're supposed to.
Yeah.
Yes. Hold on, let me send off this email real quick and then.
Thanks again for your patience, folks. Just want to make sure we get Lauren's slides on screen. Got a lot of great info coming your way.
Okay, I just sent it off.
Awesome.
So as we're waiting, I guess I can just begin to talk about the work that we've been doing over the last 18 months. Over the last 18 months at the National League of Cities, prior to the start of the pandemic, National League of Cities began a partnership with Stanford Legal Design Lab, where we launched the Eviction Prevention Cohort, where we began to work with, literally right before the kickoff of the pandemic, 5 cities. We selected the cities of Norfolk, Virginia, Richmond, Virginia, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and Grand Rapids. Soon after the kickoff, we had to pause due to the lockdown, but then 3 months afterwards, we launched quickly into a quick pivot to not only talk about eviction prevention, but also to talk about eviction prevention in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic and helping cities during this emergency to really think through how can they start up potential eviction diversion programs, rental assistance programs, how can they quickly augment their communication and outreach programming, as well as think through, in a moment's notice, how to really assist households from not being affected by housing instability. And that program ran for about 6 months. And from that program, we've seen success with cities working on the launch of their eviction mediation programs that were quickly implemented with CARES dollars. We've seen cities take their action plans and get additional dollars from their state to do deeper work in eviction prevention. We've also worked with the city to design a data-informed strategy to really outreach to at-risk or hard-to-reach households to get information around eviction prevention there. Soon after, we then began work on the launch of the Eviction Prevention Learning Lab, which launched in March of this year, where we, through a competitive application, selected 30 cities across 22 states to work on eviction prevention. This unique opportunity. Next slide, where we are not only working with 30 cities, but we're also working in coalition with these 30 cities with their community partners. So we're actually working with over 400 participants across the United States on eviction prevention in the midst of COVID, with a priority of using a racial equity lens. So we offer opportunities such as quarterly learning labs, where we talk about the American Rescue Plan and what does that mean for eviction prevention. We talk a lot about race and eviction prevention. And most recently, we had a session on state preemption and coalition building at the state level, because we know that communities are the laboratory where innovation happens, but we also know that in order for cities to be successful in preventing evictions, there needs to be collaboration at the state level. We also offered to our cities an opportunity to work in small group sessions to work on specific topics around eviction prevention, from eviction data to court support to eviction diversion, to finance and legal services, to eviction data, where we drilled down with each of the cities to really refine their current strategies and interventions. In addition, we also provide technical assistance to these cities to go even deeper as it relates to eviction prevention, but under the auspice of having this peer network where you have cities at your fingertips to talk through things like emergency rental assistance, to talk through things about the ERA or the American Rescue Plan, or talk through how do you develop a successful landlord program or with tenant outreach. And from our learnings from both the Learning Lab and the cohort, I'm here today to talk about how to build a successful eviction prevention strategy. What comes this strategy building comes a lot, like I said, out of the work, as well as prior to coming to NLC, I did a lot of work in eviction prevention, in landlord and tenant engagement as well. So hopefully you enjoy what I have to say around building a successful eviction prevention strategy. Next slide. And the next slide. So when building an eviction prevention strategy, it is very important to center racial equity and lived experiences in your strategy. Because as you know, Black, Indigenous, and people of color are disproportionately impacted by evictions. And more specifically, women of color are cost burdened and face higher rates of eviction. So with that said, it's important when designing and implementing an eviction prevention strategy that racial equity is at the center of this design, and racial equity is something that you are, one, being intentional about, and that as you're thinking through the strategy, as you're thinking through each of the steps, you're being very intentional to realize what the facts and figures are around eviction and who's being impacted. Also, when thinking through your eviction prevention strategy, complete a racial equity impact assessment. And this assessment is an examination of how different racial and ethnic groups will likely be affected by a proposed action or a decision. And by doing this assessment, it helps to minimize unanticipated and adverse consequences in a variety of contexts, including analysis of proposed policies, institutional practices, programs, plans, and budgetary decisions. I cannot stress this enough. Throughout our lab and our cohort, this is a very important priority that we uplift. So when thinking through the strategies that we propose, if there is not a racial equity context to it, that is something that we embed immediately, and we begin to address, to talk through how we can help to prevent eviction. Also, what's important when centering racial equity and lived experience, it's important to design the program with the target audience. Again, working with tenants and landlords are really important to creating the most comprehensive and holistic eviction prevention strategy. That way you're talking through their lived experiences and you're anticipating any barriers that they may have in terms of going through an eviction process, anything that can prevent eviction, and then really just thinking about the tools and resources that you have available that can really assist tenants from being evicted and helping landlords to help tenants remain in their homes as well. Next slide. Also important to building a eviction prevention strategy is data, and building a data infrastructure and plan. One thing I will note about data as it relates to eviction, it is very difficult to retrieve. There is no uniformity around it. With that said, that does not mean that you should not pursue creating a plan and understanding your local eviction crisis in your community. So with that said, it's important to set realistic goals to analyze eviction data, and knowing that there may be some gaps that are missing, or knowing that there may be some extra layers of steps. And what I mean by extra layers of steps, sometimes in communities, it's a matter of the data that's available is written and it's not computerized. It may be a matter of requesting eviction data one by one, but understanding that gathering that data is important, and also sometimes using proxies to assist with kind of understanding the landscape of your eviction crisis. Also, what's important, once you are able to retrieve data, be it qualitative or quantitative, it's very important to disaggregate the eviction data, because we want to address that issue of Black, Indigenous, and people of color being disproportionately affected by eviction. So it's very important that the data is disaggregated. In addition, understanding the limitation of your city eviction data. Again, there may be some gaps to it, but what you can do is really think through what the data is telling you, what's missing, and where you may be able to retrieve additional data. In addition to, once you have your plan and your data infrastructure built out, it's important that you develop and monitor core metrics of your city anti-eviction strategy, so that you can begin pivoting if necessary, and ensuring that tenants that are hard to reach are getting the resources to them, as well as sometimes landlords such as mom and pop landlords are hard to reach as well. Next slide. Also, what's important to building out an eviction prevention strategy is implementing communication and outreach strategies. And I can't stress this enough. You can build a great strategy, but if no one knows about your eviction prevention strategies or your resources or tools, then you won't see the results that you wish. And I think what is important, as I have emphasized throughout this current presentation, is centering equity and lived experience in your communication and outreach strategy. And so what does this mean? Considering communities that does not have access to broadband. This also means, how are you translating your communication material in multiple languages? One, do you have translators available for interpretation, as well as, are you providing closed caption or subtitles for video related content? In addition, sometimes words on a mailer or a letter may be too much for your intended audience. So are you thinking about visual self-help posters, mailers, postcards to kind of walk each of the participants through the steps? That includes renters and landlords. Also, I think is a very important step to stress. How are you implementing uniform messaging? With the eviction prevention crisis, there are a lot of resources available for tenants and landlords to utilize. The issue that I've seen over the last 18 months is the information that's being communicated is not uniform. Uniform in the sense of flyers, voicemails, or emails. So taking time to really think about how messaging is the same, and that all the target audience is getting the same message throughout when you're sending out mailers, and there's no confusion from your digital strategy from your paper-based strategy. Also, how can you increase visibility online? So an important thing is your website. Is this information in multiple places on your website? Is there a web page where there's all the information, or banners throughout your websites guiding people to your resources? That's very important. Also, is your content on social media consistent? Are you consistently posting about the resources that are available through your eviction prevention strategy? Also, thinking beyond an online presence. The reality is not a lot of people have access to internet. So How are you utilizing your call centers such as 211 or 311 in your community to push out information about eviction? Also, news releases. How are you tapping into your local media to really talk more about the resources that are available? How are you pushing out information on the radio? How are you using resident newsletters to get out the information, or even text messages to get out information that resources are available? Also very important is working with trusted community partners. I can't stress this enough. In addition to a digital and a paper-based strategy, how are you working with community-based organizations or community development corporations or nonprofit agencies that are reaching communities that are hard to reach in your community, who can translate about the resources available? It's very important so that misinformation can be reduced. Additionally, if you can't achieve things through a uniform messaging, visibility online, or working through community partners, it's important for you to go to the residents. I can't stress enough how much canvassing neighborhoods and handing out information or placing door knockers on doors, even magnets, or sending out postcards to residents is important in attending community events, so that they're aware of the resources available, and so that they're not saying, I don't have assistance, and so that they know that there is resources available out there. So it's very important to really think through your communication and outreach strategies. Next slide. Also, what is important, like I said before, communities are the laboratory for innovation, but it's also important to partner with your state and general assembly members to let them understand the issues that are taking place in your local community, and to educate them about it. So it's very important to, one, build statewide coalitions, because as you know, there are many organizations that are really focused on preventing eviction. So imagine if you're all working in coalition trying to make substantial change at the state level. It's also important to partner with your state General Assembly members as well, informing them about the issue, giving them the data, letting them know what you're doing in your community, and just in general, education, educate. It's important to get those matters out there so that legislation that's being proposed and adopted are making a equitable impact in your community and are not exacerbating the current situation. Next slide. Also is important when thinking through your eviction prevention strategy, and I can't stress this enough, is setting aside funding for eviction prevention and affordable housing. This is a historical moment in terms of funding at the local level. In addition to the CARES funding that has been made available, there has been the Emergency Rental Assistance 1 and 2, as well as the American Rescue Plan funding made available. So during this time, transformational change can happen, particularly as it relates to eviction prevention. So really thinking through how can you utilize general funds dollars made available at the city or county level, federal funding, and philanthropic funding to really not only think about preventing an eviction during the COVID-19 pandemic, but how can you ensure that when you're building out your strategy that it remains intact long after the pandemic, and these safety nets are available for your residents or community members. So really just thinking through. And when you're thinking through your eviction prevention strategy, also thinking about affordable housing. In the Eviction Prevention Lab, we have cities working on a number of topics as it relates to eviction, but we have a subset of our participants working through affordable housing and housing stability programming, really thinking through, okay, in addition to preventing evictions, how can we make it safe and affordable for people to remain in their housing, because people are getting priced out. So not forgetting that as you build out your eviction prevention strategy, as well as thinking about who is getting priced out, should also be a priority. Again, centering racial equity. Next slide. So now we're going to get into the tools of eviction prevention. And the tools, they are not an exhaustive list, but these are some of the tools that we have talked about, helped cities think through over the last 18 months. So the first tool being, and no tool, and I'll say this before I get into the tool, no tool will prevent eviction. It's working together and building out that strategy. So the first tool is emergency rental assistance. It's a direct cash assistance that aids renters or landlords with paying for rent, utilities, home, energy costs in emergency situations. In this instance, I would like to point to San Antonio, Texas. They have a pretty successful emergency rental assistance program. Also note that emergency rental assistance can be administered by either a city, a county, or a state, as well as community-based and community development corporations. Another tool to think about is eviction mediation. It offers an opportunity for landlords, tenants to discuss disputes in a power neutral setting prior to the formal filing of an eviction. And an example I will offer you is Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. One of the deliverables through our eviction prevention cohort, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania was able to stand up a nonprofit to provide mediation to the residents of Allegheny County. So that was a successful deliverable coming out of the work that they did with National League of Cities. Next slide. A next thing to think through is access to legal representation. Right to counsel is another intervention. It provides an attorney for people who cannot afford one in such cases, provides basic rights, ensures that the court reaches the correct results, levels the playing field, and save more money than it costs. An example that I will tout is New York City's right to counsel. In most cases, tenants do not have an attorney, so leveling the playing field is an intervention to provide access to legal representation. If you cannot implement this recommendation, another recommendation is to provide legal assistance, and this may consist of full or partial representation, which may include brief counsel and advice, preparation of forms, assisted with negotiation or same-day trial preparation. And an example that I'll lift up is Stanford Legal Design Lab, Legal Help FAQs. This website provides to any resident or landlord in the country how to get in touch with legal representation in their community. I would check out that website. Next slide. Landlord and tenant outreach and coordinator or officer provides advice, not legal advice, to landlords and tenants, as well as connects landlords and tenants to local resources. I would like to tout Tacoma, Washington. They have a landlord and tenant coordinator that assists landlords and tenants navigate through the eviction process. And in this position, be it a coordinator, officer, or a liaison, is really helpful. Yes, websites are good, but sometimes having someone walk you through the steps is very helpful, and not only walk you through the steps related to eviction, or you're having issues with your landlord, or if a landlord is having issues with a tenant, just having someone to kind of point you to resources or services that may be available. Another no-brainer, I would say, is a website or a web page. Prior to the pandemic, there were not a lot of websites or web pages up related to eviction prevention in both cities and communities, which provide landlords and tenants with relevant information related to housing stability programs, resources, and rights and responsibility. And this is important because this is the beginning step where tenants and landlords can go to, one, perhaps learn their rights and responsibility, learn about local eviction prevention tools such as emergency rental assistance, mediation, if there's a landlord and tenant officer. And I would recommend, and I've seen variety across the months of having a single web page that has all the information there, so that you don't have your target audience going back and forth to certain web pages and things are not connecting. And so I would like to uplift Milwaukee Rental Housing Resource Center, which is a very robust website that really walks tenants and landlords through the services and tools available in the city of Milwaukee. Next slide. And lastly, I would like to talk about eviction diversion. And eviction diversion is a holistic combination of services that divert a landlord and tenant dispute away from a court judgment. And a diversion program coordinates multiple streams of help. And what that means is whatever the tenant may be going through, or a landlord, a diversion program really thinks holistically or comprehensively about how to divert evictions. So a diversion program may have rental assistance to assist with if a tenant is having a financial issue. A diversion program may have legal representation. They may have assistance where they're working with a legal aid society, or they may have a right to counsel program. Also, a diversion program may have mediation services to walk both the tenant and landlord through, or they may have other financial and social services like education to know their rights and responsibility, other financial resources to dip into, connecting them to housing resources, and potentially health resources. A highly touted eviction diversion program is the city of Philadelphia. But really, when you're thinking about an eviction prevention strategy, I would really recommend implementing a eviction diversion program, because as mentioned earlier, one intervention is not necessarily the panacea to preventing evictions, and you have to really think through what tenants are going through, as well as landlords, and making sure that you're pairing them with the right intervention, and that that it is sufficient to meet their needs. Next slide. Also, ensuring equitable results. And I know we have talked a lot about racial equity, but I want to continue to drive home how to ensure equitable results. So next slide. So number one, accessibility is very important. The information, how the information is being distributed, how people are receiving information. And to kind of give you a think through, today I was building out a strategy around how can tenants complete an application to receive emergency rental assistance, and really thinking through, okay, if you have an online application, is there a paper application? If you have a paper application, do you have a landlord and tenant officer or a eviction navigator or a housing navigator to help a resident potentially fill out the information? When you have this application, is it translated in multiple languages? If it's not translated into multiple languages, do you have a liaison that can provide interpretation services? So it's very important. So as you're building out your eviction prevention strategies, you're really thinking through that there is no such thing as a model renter or a model landlord, but you're trying to think through all the barriers that may come up from someone from successfully receiving the resources they need to prevent an eviction. Also thinking through about unbanked tenants, checks are being cut for emergency rental assistance, but some tenants may not have access to a traditional banking account or alternative financial products. And so when cutting them a check, you don't want them to lose money in the process with trying to make themselves whole. So how are you thinking through alternative strategies for your tenants to receive cash assistance? Are you thinking about prepaid debit cards? Are you thinking about partnering with local credit unions or financial institutions or local businesses to make the process easier? And how are you disseminating that information as well? Also thinking about sealing of eviction records. I think it's very important to emphasize having that Scarlet E is a detriment to a lot of tenants. So how can we ensure that, they are able to get back into housing, and housing that is safe, quality, and affordable? So things to kind of think through as you are centering your eviction prevention strategy with lived experience, as well as applying a racial equity lens to prevent evictions. Next slide. And next slide. And I also want to leave you with a lot of resources that we have built out over the course of 18 years. And this list is not exhaustive, but we have a number of resources available out there for you to tap into. A resource I would like to uplift is the Eviction Innovations by Stanford Legal Design Lab, where they try to capture all the interventions that cities are doing across the country. I would also want to lift up a blog that I wrote last year about building a just and fair anti-eviction strategy and what that looks like, as well as uplifting communication, outreach, engagement. I think that it's very important, and that, when engaging with both renters and landlords, it's about building trust. And it also talks about how do you begin the engagement process, from attending tenant and landlord association meetings, starting advisory boards to hear their feedback, to hear what the issues are, and not necessarily assume what they are going through. So just really thinking about it. And also I have some recommendations that we developed with New America and partners about creating a national local
Folks, it looks like we may have lost connection with our speaker. If you have any questions for her, she was just about finished with her presentation there. If you have any questions for Lauren, go ahead and put those in the chat. We'll try to reconnect with her here.
And I do have a couple of the questions here. I do want to assure you that we will contact her to see if we can get the slides attached to the presentation, because we will have the presentation available following this, and it will be on Housing Washington in the long run. And so I'd like to see if I can get the slides. Certainly, if nothing else, all of those really valuable resources.
And we'll just give Lauren a few seconds, a few minutes here to reconnect. We do have a little bit of time left in the session here, so stand by, folks. We'll try to get Lauren back with us here in a moment. Folks, in the event that we aren't able to get Lauren back with us, we'll go ahead and share her contact information that she provided at the end of the PowerPoint presentation here. We'll throw that on screen for a few minutes. Feel free to reach out to her directly. She can answer any questions you may have. And yes, Cheryl, we will try to get that presentation posted up on the platform so folks can download these slides, and we'll be able to grab any of those links that were tricky to read or might have been on screen for too little time to download there. So we'll go ahead and share Lauren's contact information here.
Yeah. So yeah, we apologize. She's saying she thinks either her computer died or the internet was interrupted. So I'm really sorry that we didn't get a chance, but please send her your questions directly to Lowery@nlc.org. And I know that from a fact that I spent quite a bit of time on that site myself, and many of those links that she's talking about are on the website. So that please go to, it's www.nlc.org. All right, I think we're going to go ahead. It is about 5 minutes to 3, and she has not been able to come back on. So I apologize because I know that Lauren really wanted to do Q&A. So I think we'll go ahead and end the session, and we'll be in touch. Please stay after the session. And the next thing is going to be our final Friend of Housing winner, and then the meet and greet with the housing winner. So stop and say hi to everybody, okay? Thanks so much, and take care, and sorry that we were unable to provide you with the rest of the session. Thank you.